Allah says in Surah Baqarah chapter number 2, verse number 261, that the parable of those who spend their way in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the parable of those who spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a grain of corn. And that corn becomes 7 years. Each year bearing 100 corns. That means that one grain becomes 700 grains. Allah says, if you spend in the way of Allah, Allah will give you 700 times profit. In business terminology, 70,000% profit. If you spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah promises you 70,000% profit, 700 times profit. And Allah continues, Allah will give you much more. That means minimum profit Allah has guaranteed you. If you spend in the way of Allah, is 70,000%, 700 times profit. Allah continues, وَأَمْوَالٌ اِقْتَرَفْتُمُوهَا وَتِجَارَةٌ تَخْشَوْنَ كَسَادَهَا وَمَسَاكِنُ تَرْضَوْنَهَا. The wealth you have amassed, the business in which you deal, the house in which you live. What are your considerations? Why are you afraid to do dawah? Why are you afraid to go for jihad in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Striving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are you worried about your wealth? The business in which you deal? Okay, if I do dawah with a non-Muslim, maybe I will lose my business. Maybe I'll have less customers. The wealth you have amassed, the business in which you deal, the house in which you live. Are you afraid that if you do dawah, strive and struggle in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be striving physically, whether it be striving for dawah, whether it be striving to explain the Quran, are you afraid of your fathers, of your sons, of your brothers, of your spouses, wives and husbands, of your relatives, the wealth you have amassed, the business in which you deal, the house in which you live? And Allah continues, Ahabba ilaykum min Allahi wa rasuli wa jihadin fi sabili. If you love all these 8 things more than Allah, more than His Rasul, and doing jihad in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and striving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,